Today we're going to take a look at a game that's at once an old classic and brand new. We're having a look at the latest version of the Russian campaign. This just came out from GMT. They're calling this the 5th edition, the 5th edition, Deluxe edition. This game, if you're a regular wargamer, you've probably played it in your history or know a bit about it, but it's gone through many versions. It first came out, I think, in about '74 from a little company called Jedco, and there was 2 editions from Jedco, and then Avalon Hill picked it up and put out what I guess we're calling the 3rd edition, but I think that the Avalon Hill version itself might have went through like 3 editions of its rule set as well. And then it was out of print for a while, and L2 Design Group picked it up and made a 4th edition, and they enhanced it and with more premium components and whatnot. And now GMT has picked up the mantle and put out a 5th edition and incorporated some of the things that L2 Group did as well. I should note that there is sort of a side branch as well. This year, Compass Games also came out with a version, but as far as I know, their version of the Russian campaign is a strict remake of one of the 2 Jedco versions. I imagine the 2nd edition of the Jedco. So this new version is based mostly on the Avalon Hill, but takes some of the things that they learned from the L2 Design Group version, as I understand it. And it gives you a whole bunch of optionals, and it kind of takes everything that's been learned over the last 40 years or whatever it's been of play of this game, and tried to tighten it up without drastically changing the rules, hardly changing the rules at all really, but a couple of small changes, and then also providing counters for optional things that have been proposed along the years, both in the Avalon Hill General Magazine or in other magazines like Fire and Movement or Moves or magazines like that. This game's got a long history. It came out way back when. I think the Avalon Hill version was 1976, and it's one of those games like Victory in the Pacific where it's still being played at tournaments today. If you go to the World Board Game Championships, you'll probably see Victory in the Pacific. If you go to any of those big wargaming tournaments, you'll probably see somebody having a go at the Russian campaign. So this isn't going to be really a review of the game itself. This game's been around for, like I said, 40 years or more, I guess. And it's stood the test of time. If you're interested, there's no shortage of strategy and analysis articles in old issues of the General and what have you. Those can be found online in PDF form for free. I'll put a link in the notes about where to find those if I can rustle it up. But yeah, I don't think there's any need for me to give a review of how this game works or whether it's any good or not. I think it stood the test of time, and those that like it love it, and those that don't, well, they've already passed it by. It's just briefly, I'll say it's a classic hex and counters game set on the East Front, the whole of the East Front. It's got a combat, it's a CRT, odds-based CRT. It's going to be familiar to most people who've been in the hobby for a while. It's one of those games, I don't think it was the first one to do it, but where you get to move, combat, and then the armor has an exploitation movement. I think it's one of those type of East Front games. Anyway, it's been around forever. People love it. It's not a perfect representation of the East Front by any means, but it was the best we had at the time, and as a game, it's simply outstanding. So that's all I want to say up front. Now I'll go over a few of the things that make this version the Deluxe 5th edition that it is. Okay, the first thing that we notice about the new version is the enlarged map. This is half the map. The map comes in 2 sections, 22 by 34 each, and they would fit on my table actually this way, but my table is not wide enough. It makes I guess a 32 by 44 inch map in total, but I don't I don't have room for that. The hexes are they're 1 inch hexes, which is much bigger than the original map. And if you remember the old map, I don't have a copy of mine anymore. Mine got mildewed somewhere along the way, and I had to get rid of it. But the old one was a much paler map. It was almost a sort of a white color. I guess it looked more wintry in that way. But this one has more color, a little more detail, but still very clear, very clean, very easy to see what's going on. Here, I'll just see if we can zoom in and get a close-up on some of this. As well, you can see across the top we've got the replacement pool, off-map units box, weather box, surrendered units, etc. The turn record track there. Baltic Sea, Gulf of Finland movement chart, air power availability chart. The bottom section of the map also has holding boxes and whatnot as well. So yeah, right away we can see that it's a much improved map. I have the paper version, but it also available at a little extra charge. You can get a mounted map of the whole thing as well. So that's the first thing you notice. I think the second big thing in terms of components is, of course, the counters are instead of the original half-inch counters that came in the original game. Now we have 5/8 inch counters. Let's see if we can get a. Maybe I'll just zoom in here. And you can see, I was going to start clipping these, but there's hardly anything in terms of like corner nibs. These counters popped out so easily. I may go without clipping because they're just so sort of perfect as is. You can also see, it's printing has come a long way since this 1976, 1980 when these games were when I got my first version of this game. And you can see how much closer to the edge of the counters we can print now without it being offset, or, so the typeface can be larger, the images can be larger. So in addition to the counters being larger, everything is larger and more readable. The counters are great. Okay, in addition to the updated components, there's a few extra components and whatnot included in the game as well. There's a section starting in section 26 of the rule book. There's a section of optional rules, and I think most of these rules appeared in previous versions of the game, either the original Jedco, the Avalon Hill, or the L2 version that is kind of known as version 4 now. This game is now being known as version 5. And then there's this section 28, which has bonus material, which includes some new variant ideas, sort of optional rules as well, that came out in different publications during the game's history. So I'm just going to go through a few of these and let you know what's involved. In the optionals, there's a rule for SS replenishment that just gives the SS units that are priority over replenishment. So it's an optional rule that favors the Germans a little bit. A lot of these optional rules are going to tilt the balance one way or the other. There's an optional rule on industrial evacuation, which gives the Russians the chance to pull some of their industry back, I think, back towards the east at the expense of increasing their rail capacity. I think that's what the trade-off is there. That's one of those rules that you use in the campaign game only. Obviously, it's not for the shorter scenarios. There's a historical weather chart instead of rolling for the weather. I think that's been around since the beginning. But then this is an interesting one from the original, not the original Jedco, the Jedco second edition game. This is battle groups. This gives you a chance, instead of completely eliminating certain units, they are replaced by these smaller battle groups. So starting in 1942, Russian Guards, German armor, motorized infantry, or SS units, whenever they're eliminated in EX, D1, or Defender eliminated results, their remnants, hereafter known as battle groups, survive if able to retreat. So there's these counters here are available in the game, as well as optional counters that you can use. There's a full list of rules for the battle groups there. And then there's the next section is on artillery. It allows you to, instead of bringing in some replacement units, you can bring in extra artillery instead. That's an optional rule as well. Does add a little bit of extra complexity, but it's not bad. There's an optional rule on national restrictions about where Finnish units can go. Also, Italy, Hungary, and Romania. Restrictions on where they can go, an optional rule for that. Optional rules on historical naval restrictions, and a rule for bidding for sides. If both players kind of know what they're doing and have a feel for balance in the game, it's just a rule for how to bid for sides. Pretty easy. An optional rule for fortress cities. This is an optional rule to either side can use this to make a decision to really defend particular cities, and they become harder to capture. A rule for strategic movement for units that are far from the front. A rule for Hungarian neutrality and Romanian logistics. This keeps Hungary out of the beginning of the game, I think, for just a little bit. I think that's the basics of that one. An optional rule for Russian recovery. This has to do with Russian increase in recruitment as the battle went on, as the war went on. An optional rule for Russian artillery barrage. This is again from the second edition Jedco. And this it includes these artillery barrage counters, and they're available in the updated or in the extra counters as well. There's an optional rule for optional worker units that gives you a couple more counters as well, and it ties in with the bidding system, and so that's how you get some extra workers. And I think that's it for optional rules. Oh no, there's a couple more. Feeding the beast replacement accumulation. This is just a rule to prevent sort of gamey strategies that where the Axis player tries not to cause too many Russian casualties, so that the Russians don't get enough replacement units. So it's just a alternative rule just to deal with a little bit of a gamey situation. Mobile leaders, if you remember the Hitler and the Stalin counters in the original game are 1-0, 1-0, and this makes them movable, which makes them much more vulnerable, but you're able to use them more. And then they also Lvov Hills adjustment. This has been a contested or a much discussed piece of terrain feature. This is these hills, right? Let's see if I can widen back out here. These hills right here, and remember the rest of the map also comes. The second map is down on this side. These hills right here. A lot of people have said, well, there aren't any hills or mountains right there, and that should all be open terrain. So they give you the option to do that. They give you a little overlay that turns those into clear hexes, but with the dire warning that it makes this section, it makes it much easier for the Axis to sweep through this area. Those mountains were a real, in the way the game's normally been played, they were a key part of the defense on this part of the map. So, but anyway, it gives you the opportunity to use those. Use the map as it was, or use the map as some folks think it should be. Then we have then the book has a few scenarios. I think there's maybe more scenarios than in the original, but I'm not sure. But anyway, on to the bonus material. There's some interesting stuff here because these came from different places. There's a revised historical setup that's that gives you that uses the little terrain insert as well, and changes the setup a little bit. There's a variant for Hitler, his no retreat rules, which hamstrings the Germans a little bit. Then there's an article in Moves magazine, issue 79 from 1994, and they had a whole bunch of variants that added quite a few different ideas and counters to the game. So there was can we see here? No, let's see. I'm gonna get right in here. There was a couple of counters for 2 German flak corps. There was the OKH Corps and Vistula Corps, so a couple of HQs there. There was the 38th Panzer Corps, the 3rd and 4th SS Panzer Corps. This one isn't a new unit, this is just a different rule. Then we have the 8th, 10th, and 11th Guards armies. These are actually, they were actually around in real life, but apparently they were not in the original game, just for play balance reasons, I think. So these work as replacements. We have there we go, the 12th SS Corps, a little single counter variant depicting the units, or a single unit for the Warsaw Uprising. It's a little 2-0 unit that can never be moved out of Warsaw. And then some more variants here. There was an article in the General magazine that added some, let's see, can we get it there? Yeah, there we go. Some artillery units to the game. I'll widen out here a bit because we've got a few more rules here. Some new sea transport rules. And then there was some different, they call them alternative strategic scenarios. And there's a few counters for these as well, depending on the scenario. There's one called the Mediterranean distraction, where Hitler doesn't invade the Balkans, and there's a couple of extra counters in that one. There's something called the Russian reaction, where Stalin decides whether to bring the Siberian army west to defend against the Germans, and I don't think it has any extra counters. There's the Italian sellout, where Hitler decides not to send the Africa Corps to bolster Mussolini's feeble war effort, so Italy withdraws from the war, and the British commit their forces to Roundup instead of to the desert. So we have a different counter available there, and then something called Japanese Gambit, and all this. You can decide how you're going to play these. There's a sort of an option flow chart here that's where if you use this option or you don't use this option, it tells what you can or can't do in terms of all these different options. So there's that's a bunch of sort of larger strategic things that are kind of what-if scenarios that twist the game a bit. But for people who play the game a lot, I think there'd be some fun in those. Then there was, this was from, I guess, Battle Plan Magazine #1. This was an interesting, this is a sort of like large random events. The German and the Russian each draw a chit numbered 1 to 6, and there's 6 different events for each side that make a fairly decent difference to the way the game plays, but it's they're kept secret. You don't have to show the you don't have to show which one you have until certain conditions are met, and then you have to play it. So for those that like random events in their games, that's a big switch. And oh, and then finally the last thing probably to mention is they've added these optional Bulgarian forces. It's just 4 units. Whoops. Whacked the camera there. 4 units, and it says they were added to the counter mix because there was available space on the counter sheet, but there's no written rules for these. So I guess that's for you to figure out what you want to do. So yeah, that's all the big changes in terms of what they did. They mention in the developer notes here that they tried not to make a lot. They updated the graphics, they updated the counters. They tried to make the rules, in terms of rules enhancements, they tried to just clarify things. They made very few rules additions. Just a couple of tiny things. I guess the biggest thing is, just like so many of, apparently, the rail rules keep changing from version to version, and I think this version sticks with the rail rules that were in the L2 version, but with a few pieces of clarification. But I think that's about it. Oh, and one other thing I should also mention in terms of the counters, the basic set, the counters are your NATO symbols, very familiar NATO symbols. Can I see there? There we go. But they also come with a complete, for those that don't want to use naval symbols, for the armored units. There we go. They came with it also comes with a complete set of armor silhouette counters, just to swap out your armored units, which is kind of sweet for folks who like those armored silhouettes and kind of guessing what the tanks are silhouetted there. So that's it for all the big changes in this version of the Russian campaign. So there you have it. That's what constitutes this new version. The only other thing I'll say is I really like the fact that they reused some of Roger McGowan's counter art from the Avalon Hill version. But I have to say I'm a little disappointed that they changed the font here, and they also, if you look on the map, the map uses a font that looks more like maybe the Jedco version, or yeah, it's, I don't know. I love the typeface that they used on the Avalon Hill version. So I guess a part of me wishes they would have used that. But at least they repurposed the cover art. And if you look inside, you'll see the insert uses a black and white version of some of that artwork as well. So there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you want a closer look at the components, I also did an unboxing. I'll link that as well in the show notes. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time on Pushing Cardboard.